Mary, welcome to That's For Sure podcast. I'm so grateful that we're doing this today.
Oh my gosh, me too. We have Mary Ellen and Carrie Ellen hanging out together.
I love it.
What more could we ask for?
Is Ellen your middle name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
it was
right.
meant to be.
That's right.
It was meant to be. I love it so much.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, maybe we could start with just an introduction of who you are, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, for sure. I always kind of joke like the elevator pitch version of Mary, of my story is I grew up in a single wide trailer in very rural West Virginia on the very top of a mountain called Fenwick Mountain in West Virginia, kind of right between Summersville and Richwood, if anybody's familiar with the area. And my dad's a logger. His dad was a logger. His grandfather was a logger and a coal miner. We have like 8 generations deep of loggers and coal miners in my family. I always joke we're kind of like the West Virginia state flag. And I am the first in my family to go to college, my immediate family to go to college. My parents both sort of barely graduated high school. And then in one generation, I not only go to graduate college, I get my master's, and then I eventually end up at Yale for law school, which is quite the sort of upward explosion in one generation. And so in my first book, Dirt, I kind of go back. It's sort of a story we've heard before of humble beginnings to the Ivy League, but it was really important to me to go and look at my story in this sort of full circle, making your way back home. What does your story look like through the lens of empathy and grace? And just sort of getting interested in the spark that came the generations before in that, preceded that upward explosion. And so that's kind of, the Mary up through her mid-20s. And then I met my husband, Justin, while I was in law school, and we ended up becoming photographers together for like 15 plus years, and then photography educators and speakers, got to travel all over the world teaching photography. And then at the height of that, pivoted yet again. So law school to photographer to author. And I signed with my publisher to actually write 5 books in 2019. And so this book is my 3rd book. Number 2 was Slow Growth Equals Strong Roots. And now this 3rd one is Underestimated.
Wow. Thank you for that background. I love the photography era. I used to want to be a photographer for National Geographic. I just thought that would be the coolest job when I was younger. So I love that. That's so cool.
Nice. Have you ever seen The Secret Life of Walter Mitty?
No.
I think that was actually about Life magazine.
Okay.
But it's sort of the story of this guy who's kind of like in the cubicles in the office, but he dreams of going and he's like friends with the photographer who's going all over the world, taking the photos, and then they're missing the final photo for the final cover, and he has to go track him down. It's just a really good movie. It's Ben Stiller's the star.
Oh, okay. I'll for sure have to check it out.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's so great. And now where are you located now?
We ended up staying in New Haven. So Yale's in New Haven. And, I sort of always thought, this was kind of coming to the city for me, growing up in West Virginia. And I sort of thought as soon as I could, we would move into more of like the country in Connecticut. And we are actually we're on the very, very eastern side of New Haven. So it's almost East Haven. It's so far east. And we kind of get the best of both worlds. We're very much a little coastal village, a little sleepy hamlet right on the water. And then, downtown is just a few minutes away if we want to get there.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful state. I went to grad school up in Massachusetts and would often drive from Massachusetts to New York City. Yeah. And my preferred route was right through Connecticut, right through that area. And then I had the privilege of taking my sons to Connecticut about 1.5 years ago. My husband went to the Coast Guard Academy up there. Mm-hmm. And my youngest at the time, he was 4, and he called it Connect. So it's forever Connect. For us.
That's how I remember how to spell it. Connect, cut.
Yes.
Yes. We've been to that Coast Guard Academy. We've actually photographed weddings there.
Oh, really? It's a beautiful grounds. So.
And we got married of just a few miles away from there.
Nice. Yeah. What a beautiful spot that you're in. So, I am so excited to have this conversation with you today, Mary, because I know you have this new book coming out. What's release date?
April 29th. We're getting close. Yeah.
So soon. Soon. And I'm so excited for folks to get their hands on this book. It's called Underestimated: The Surprisingly Simple Shift Quit playing small, name the fear, and move forward anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary, A good book, the best kind of books are the ones that make you laugh, make you cry, or make you think. And your book, 120%, makes me think. It has made me think over and over and over. And so well done right off the bat.
Thank you. I hope it also made you laugh a little and also maybe even cry a little. There's a little bit of all of that in there, I think.
It did. There is a little bit of everything in there. And I will say I'm super impressed with your movie knowledge. Like you start us off with a movie and all the way through the book, there are different references to movies. So well done. I mean, my first question about it is, how did this book come about and for whom did you write it to?
Yeah, I mean, there's the running wisdom of you write the book that you need, right? That you write the book that you wish you could read, but it doesn't quite exist anywhere out there. And I feel like I've sort of been preparing for this book for my whole life, which will be 45 years in May. And it originally came I will say this, Carrie, from the very first second that this idea came to me, I knew it was a special book. I knew it was a special book. I felt complete awe and like kind of like the doubled over, have the wind knocked out of you in the best sort of way, kind of awe that this idea picked me. Liz Gilbert in Big Magic talks about this idea of sort of all the ideas are kind of personified. They're walking around in the world. They're tapping people on the shoulder. They're asking them to enter into a handshake contract with them in order for them to get made and birthed into the world as the fullest iteration of what they most want to be. And so when this idea picked me, the fact that there isn't a book out there like this that's going so systematically through all the faces of fear. For everybody listening, every chapter is a different one of those biggest, broadest faces fear puts on: procrastination, perfectionism, people-pleasing, imposter syndrome, overthinking, self-doubt, self-sabotage. 14 of them in total. And then within each chapter, we go through a bunch more of kind of like the subsets, the different kinds of overthinking, the different kinds of procrastination, the different kinds of lies fear uses each time it's putting on that face. And so for me, when I sat down to write this book, I originally thought it was going to be a book that was 100% about when the world discounts us, when the world looks right through us. Because I've sort of felt that way my whole life. I've kind of felt, trailer to Yale Law, like I'm one big underdog story, yet I've never quite reached that moment of arrival where suddenly people stop treating me like the person in the room that they don't need to know until enough time passes that they go, oh, okay, like I didn't realize what you bring to the table. I didn't realize the excellence that you show up with. And so when I started writing it, one of the best rules of writing I've learned through doing 3 books in 5 years is that the idea will tell you what it wants to be. And there's certainly, 20 to, 22% of this book is about when other people do it to us. But 80% of this book became about when we do it to ourselves and all the different ways we do it to ourselves, and we allow fear to keep us playing small. And so it turned out that writing this book became a lot more about the working on me than any of the previous books. And all of them have worked on me, but this one was the most. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's it. You get in, the words show up when you do, and then they take shape, as you continue on. And right. I think this book is so needed and so timely. And one of the things that I absolutely loved about it was how relatable it is. So these are, like you said, ideas that are in our heads, in all of our heads, and not just something that the world is pressing against us, but something within us.
That's right. That word relatable has come up a lot, actually. As I've been doing these podcast interviews, relatable has been like one of the most common ones I've heard. And, different versions of that are like, are you reading my email? Like, how are you in my head? Stop spying on me. Are you in my living room? Kind of a thing. And I think that's what happens when we are willing to be honest about what it's like to be in the trenches. And we're not just trying to be like from the mountaintop, like never play small again. What? Like it's hard. That's not helpful. That's not actually helpful. We help people when we're sort of just a few steps ahead saying, hey, I see a better way up here from this vantage point. Yeah. I'm just a few steps further up the mountain. And I want you to avoid that place that's going to get you tripped up. I want you to avoid that place where you're going to get on the wrong path. So I love that.
Yeah. Well, in the book, you write about these simple shifts that help us stop playing small, and then they help us move from stuck to start.
That's
And
right.
so I want to talk about a few of those in our conversation today that really resonated with me. The chapters that I thought you could insert my name, the ones that are like, are you reading my emails? Yeah. So I want to talk to you about a few of those today. But before we get there, can you talk about why it's a switch and not a dial?
Yes. Yeah. I love that you talked about the stuck to start part too, Carrie, because one of the earliest iterations of the cover mock-up that I had mocked up myself actually had like an A to a B and like a dotted line between them. And my editor, Kelsey, I distinctly remember her saying, like, at first I didn't understand that. I thought it should be A to Z, right? We're going the full distance. And then it was like this sort of like epiphany moment of like, no, sometimes we have trouble even taking the first step, right? Even moving out of the starting line. And so, as you're kind of going through the book, there's a couple of chapters where I'm really just setting up the pain point. I'm setting up the problem for those of us who feel like we've been spending our entire lives pushing this boulder up the hill. And other people do not seem to have this problem. They just go implement, execute, and achieve what? Like it's hard, Elle Wood style. Meanwhile, we get just within arm's length, we can taste the rarefied air of our breakthrough moment. And we suddenly feel like there could be a lot of eyes on what we're doing and that there will be any eyes at all. And at that last minute, we blink and we lose our grip, we lose our way. We go, just kidding. And we drop the ball, we drop the boulder, and it rolls all the way back down the mountain. And so once we kind of set up that problem, it's like, well, how do we actually start to break out of that? And I read this article once that I have, credited in the book where the author was talking about the best books are a switch, not a dial. They flip the thinking, the traditional wisdom on its head instead of just turning the volume up on what we've already been thinking. And most people, when they hear a phrase like quit playing small, they think that means they have to become people who every single day just go big, like leap after leap after leap. That's the only thing that counts. That's the only thing that gets rewarded in this world are the really big swings. And I say in that part, where we sort of introduce this overarching, surprisingly simple shift, listen, don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of the go big moments. I've had a lot of them in my life. From getting into Yale for law school to signing a 5-book deal to doing a coast-to-coast tour with my face on the side of a tour bus. Like we've done some really big swings. The problem is the very next day, the day after everything, the day after our hero gets everything they ever wanted, I still went back to immediately feeling like an imposter, to immediately feeling like I should doubt myself every step of the way, that other people were going to show up better than I was, that they were more qualified or equipped than I was. And so none of those go big headline day kind of moments ever changed that about me. So the very, ironic kind of paradoxical premise of this book is that we think in order to quit playing small, we have to always go big, when in reality, some of the most important work we'll do to quit doubting ourselves like that, to quit hiding in plain sight like that, actually begins by starting small.
Yeah, it's such good imagery that you use. I will say I've enjoyed the graphics throughout.
Nice. Thank you. I mocked those up myself as well. Yes.
Love it. It adds such an element to the text because it gives you a visualization for how this really works and what we're talking about here. And so I appreciate the word pictures to go along with the ideas so very much. So I mentioned
and for everybody who's listening, they're kind of like, they look like very serious graphs and charts to begin with, but when you look closer, they're actually quite humorous and they're referencing parts in the book that they stand for. Yeah.
They're wonderful. Yeah. I love it. I'm all for more pictures and graphics and books all the time. So I mentioned there were like three things I wanted to talk about that really resonated with me. And the three are fear, imposter syndrome, which I didn't realize that I have an issue with imposter syndrome until I read this chapter. Okay. And then procrastination. So I want to start with fear. And Mary, how do you define fear?
I define fear as a punk, as a really boring liar, honestly. Listen, we can, I know that this is more of a faith-based audience, so we can say that that's, an enemy that is the father of lies, that would love to keep us standing still and hiding our talents, burying them in the ground and not moving forward on the good work that was prepared for us in advance. That's probably the most direct way of answering that. I've seen it described as the resistance. Stephen Pressfield in The War of Art does a beautiful job of describing it as the resistance, although for him, that sort of solely leans into there's a part in the book where he specifically says, The resistance is self-sabotage. It's sort of like what we do, inwardly. And it doesn't kind of get at this, it can be other people doing this. There is a part where he talks about resistance recruits allies, which we talk about in the book, where it tries to get your friends and family to get you to doubt what you're doing. But this, this idea is sort of like fear as our opponent, fear as our frenemy, fear that like wants you to feel like it's just looking out for you. It wants you to feel like it's just giving you responsible advice, that it's keeping you safe. But in reality, it's delighting and celebrating every time it can get another day to go by without you getting moving on the dream. And so I pulled out, I coach a lot of women now, people who want to write books, people who want to start businesses, speak from the stage, build out courses, whatever the case is. And I just started to notice that fear was attacking all of them and myself in very, very predictable, similar ways. And that people were kind of getting tripped up and falling prey to fear in very similar, predictable ways. And I just was really frustrated about it one day. And I pulled out my phone, Carrie, and I just didn't even give an intro. I just started rattling off, it's all been done. It's all been done better. It's all been done better by somebody the world actually wants to pay attention to. I can't start until it's perfect. I can't start until I am perfect. I can't start until I have the perfect blueprint. I can't start until I know every step in the staircase. What if I start and I can't stay consistent with it? What if I start and I don't have the bandwidth right now? What if I start and the critics come? What if they say, who does she think she is? What if I fail? What if I fall? What if I prove every person who's ever said you don't have what it takes that they were right about me all along? What if my voice doesn't matter? What if I don't really matter? What if it's already too late? And I just kind of put it up and I said, fear's a really boring liar. Fear's not your friend. Start anyway. Start now. And it took off. And that becomes kind of the premise of this book when we're really introducing fear. There's some other really interesting things that we'll probably want to talk about. I'll just kind of set them up. I've been talking for a long time. So I'll say, let's talk about how fear wants to attack creatives in particular. That's a really interesting characteristic. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why I think this resonated with me so much, is because I am a very creative thinker. I'm an author. I love to write content. I love to create new things. I've recently gotten into woodworking and DIY because I can build something. I can create. And yet I hear all of those thoughts that you rattled off a minute ago on replay, all the time. And, in the book you wrote, I tested it out, Mary. I tested out the switch when I was reading, because in your book, you have this line in the chapter on fear. When you're setting the stage for the book, you write, fear wouldn't bother us unless it knew how much this work matters.
That's right.
And I tested it out. I thought, that's a flip the switch statement.
Yep.
That is a flip the switch statement. And so I tested it out. And I have to tell you, Mary, when I finished that chapter, I'm going to flip the switch. I, as a writer, felt more inspired to write after reading that chapter than I have for a few weeks. I've been kind of a little bit of a stuck moment with my book. And I read that and thought, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm going to use this to my advantage.
Yeah, that's right. We can use it to our advantage.
I'm going to use this to really move forward. And so that flip the switch moment for me was telling. So for those who are listening, how can they flip that switch on fear and use it to an advantage to continue to do the thing?
Yeah. So kind of circling back to that idea of the day that those dots connected in my brain, Carrie, this is the kind of high every writer is chasing. It's like the ability to connect two dots we haven't quite ever seen connected that way before. Right. And the dots were, what if fear attacks creatives in particular because fear is jealous that it itself is not creative at all, right? It is not tethered to muse or melody or the force of all creation. In fact, I think fear really only has two inherent gifts at all. One is the ability to throw its voice so that it can sound like you when it's talking to you in your head. If it sounded like Morgan Freeman, we could catch it every time, right? Sure. Like Shawshank Redemption monologue kicks on. We're like, nope, I know what's happening. Right. But make it sound like you, and it's really hard to discern. Yeah. Number two, it's this ability to shapeshift. And it's very hard to battle an enemy when you don't know what form it's going to take on. And that's a lot of the work of what this book does, is giving really visceral visuals to the different faces of fear so that it becomes a lot easier to go. Oliver Twist problem, research Riptide, Princess and the Pea problem, right? So there's all these different names and like really just like quirky visuals that I give to fear, because the faster you can catch it, the faster you can diffuse all the power it has in the room. So anyway, I say like fear attacks creatives because it itself is not creative. But fear is not a creative guy, but he is a really busy guy. And as such, like any good, productive overachiever, he has found a way to kind of prioritize who he's going to go after. And if you are one of the people who are playing small and hiding in plain sight, a little fear maintenance mode at best is all you need. A little perfectionism sprinkled in, a little self-sabotage, and you are all set.
Yeah.
Show up and do work that's going to matter, that's going to change lives, that's going to actually help people. And we better expect fear to show up teeth bared and snarling. And I actually wrote this in a Instagram post a couple days ago. I said, you know what? Here's the thing, though. What fear doesn't realize is that we've actually just lured him in with a little rope-a-dope trickery, right? We're going to get him just close enough to wear himself out. And then we're going to hit him as our Rocky IV underdog soundtrack swells with the knockout punch. We're going to use his weakness against him. If fear is that boring and uncreative and predictable, we can use it to predict when we're on the right track. Because like you said, fear would not bother you if the work you're about to do doesn't matter. So fear just showed up in full force. Good. We're about to do work that matters.
That's right. Going to use it to our advantage to help us move forward. I love that. So the second area of the book, which imposter syndrome, I thought, okay, this will be interesting, but I don't really personally have an issue with imposter syndrome until that is, I saw the two camps that you kind of put imposter syndrome folks into. And I 100% am in the, I don't want to know the data. I don't want to know, what's happening on the back end, because if I see data, if I see a number, it will discourage me and I will full on quit. I will be so discouraged that I will quit. And I have to tell you, Mary, even with this podcast, so we're in season 2, I have yet to check any data on the podcast. I will not look at how many folks have downloaded it and listened, because whether it's 100 or 10,000 or 100,000, regardless of the number, I'm fearful I will be discouraged knowing the number and I'll quit.
That's right. Yeah.
And so talk to me about that. How can we use the flip the switch moment with imposter syndrome to, again, use that data to motivate us into action and to keep going rather than cause us to quit?
Yeah. So the one that you're describing there of like not even wanting to look at the data, that's one of there's I don't know, I think 6 like sort of subheadings there of just different ways people fall into that second camp. And the second camp, the overarching umbrella there, is this idea that all of this will have been a waste of time anyway. Then all of this work we've put in, that all of the dreams we've dreamed big dreams of, the blueprints we've mapped out, the steps we've taken, the hours and the hours, the resources we've, maybe like just wasted because it didn't work out, like the time away from our families, whatever the case is. The fear is all of this will be a waste of time anyway, so why would I start? Why would I put the work in? Yeah. And the imposter syndrome chapter is one of my favorite chapters because it really digs deep into the original psychologist who first coined that phrase, Clance and Imes. And what a lot of people don't know is that a couple things. One, it was actually originally called the imposter phenomenon among high achieving women. And I joke in the book, like, I like that better. Syndrome makes me feel like I'm the lone patient zero, suffering from this chronic case of self-sabotage or whatever.
Yeah.
Phenomenon makes me feel like we're all in it together. Yep. And we talk in the book about how if you are attacked by imposter syndrome, there is one very good upside to it. You are not somebody who's ready to settle into the ranks of mediocrity, because imposter syndrome would not attack you unless you held yourself to really high standards of excellence and you were one of those high achieving people. And so, I'm kind of going through that. The other thing that a lot of people who will, they'll sort of throw a little homage to Clance and Imes as the ones who have coined the phrase, but you can tell in the way they're writing about them, they never actually pulled up the study and dug into it. And so when I actually pulled up their study and read it start to finish, one of the things that they talk about is this magical ritual thinking, this idea that if we were to ever actually believe in ourselves, that would be the moment when we would fail. Yeah. And we have to be the ones to beat ourselves up and tear ourselves up into tiny little shreds as a way of sort of using that to make sure we don't get complacent. Right. To make sure we don't, rest, to make sure we don't speak kindly to ourselves, right? We use that kind of self-abuse to keep us running harder so that we don't get found out as this, because imposter syndrome is really the fear of being found out.
Mm-hmm.
And so as, going back to data, as I'm kind of building that whole argument through the chapter, the small shift forward with imposter syndrome is something I learned in college when I went to college on a full debate scholarship, where we would sort of wheel around these moving dollies stacked 4 bins high, full of thousands and thousands of loose leaf white sheets of paper, all underlined and highlighted with all these different arguments so we could overwhelm our opponents with evidence to the contrary. And so we can actually start to use a track record of success. We can actually start to use a track record of good stewardship, right? Chapter 3 is all about our capacity for self-trust. And that's a little t trust, not a big T trust. If our big T trust, our ultimate hope is in God, little t trust, self-trust, we can get, as Christians, we can get really uncomfortable with anything that's like, oh, we can't trust ourselves. We can't put our trust in ourselves.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about stewardship. And so as we expand our capacity for showing up well, expand our capacity for stewardship, expand our capacity for, hey, we didn't rip ourselves into shreds and we still did okay when we showed up, the more we can kind of have this data to point to of like, look, we're still doing the thing we set out to do, and it didn't require us to self-loathe just to show up.
Right.
The more we have that track record, the more we can overwhelm fear with that evidence to the contrary, go nuclear on fear,
Right.
10 times if you have to, whatever it takes to kind of start to change that superstitious belief in your head that if you were to ever actually believe in yourself, that is the moment when you would fail.
Yeah. The third, and oh my word, the one that I feel like you wrote just for me, Mary, procrastination. Oh my gosh. When you were writing about how your best papers in college were done like at the 11th hour,
right?
That is totally me. That was me in college. It was me in graduate school. I can still remember running down the hall. It was like 11:59 p.m.
Yeah,
the paper was like due that day, and dropping it on the floor, under the professor's door, but getting an A+. I was like, the paper was so good. But I did it right there at the 11th hour. And I feel like I'm the worst with procrastination. But reading your chapter, you make a correlation about procrastination that I have never heard before. And I, again, feel like it's a total game changer. You said, and you were talking about your papers, you said, I don't know how to get my best work to show up until I'm almost out of time. I could say that exact statement is so true about me, but you continue and you say, start breaking your habit of procrastination right now. And that means dealing with what you're actually afraid of. Okay, Mary, I have never correlated this procrastination issue with the avoidance of pain or I have never made that correlation before. And it makes perfect sense because I'm an Enneagram 7. If there's any ounce of pain in anything, I'm like hightailing it the other direction. I'm so uncomfortable with pain. And that's just me. And one of the areas that I get to grow in as an individual. So how do we practically get to the root of our pain and what we're avoiding so that we can jump off the procrastination crazy train?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'll just kind of start with like the pain that I know I personally am avoiding. And I know that a lot of people, this is the root of the pain for them. There are other people who are going to be listening where, I can understand that. But I think for me, it's just more like, at our most basic level, Britt Frank, who I quote in the book and who's going to be on my podcast soon, she says, listen, procrastination is not a character problem, a laziness problem, an apathy problem. It is a physiological problem. And on a certain level, the ancient part of our brain, the brain that was sort of like the earliest parts of our brain, it cannot to this day separate between a woolly mammoth or like a saber-toothed tiger or whatever is like chasing us and we have a paper that's due. It just knows that feels really like pain. It feels really scary. Our brains will reward us if we avoid it. right? So that's kind of like at its most basic level, what's happening with procrastination. For me in particular, the fear that's really driving it, like what's behind the pain? The fear behind the pain for me is I'm afraid that no matter what I do, it still won't be as good as I want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I call procrastination in that chapter a double-edged cop-out that we run to the extremes. Hyperbolic discounting is something in the language, the literature around economics that they use to study procrastination. It's this idea that we will be so much better equipped and responsible and well-adjusted in the future to do the thing than we are right now. And so we put it off. And I say that this is another example of hyperbole where we're taking the excuse to the extreme on either end. Either I turn it in at the last minute and I get the A plus and I get that rush of euphoria pulling it off at the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
And I always get to say, and just think how much better it would have been if I'd had just a little bit more time. Or this is the moment when all of our self-fulfilling prophecy of believing we're going to fail actually comes true and we don't pull it off at the last minute. We always have that in our back pocket, this sort of fail-safe excuse we can pull out if we ever actually do fail that says, well, we are not people who fail. We are not people of low capabilities and capacity and talents. We were just up against impossible circumstances this one time. And so ironically, we managed to I say in the book, we managed to maintain some internal locus of control about who we are by saying this one time, these circumstances were untenable. So like internal locus means, do you control your outcomes or were you just like at the whim of the world? And we try to say, I am a person who comes through. It was just that this time the circumstances overtook me.
Yeah.
So, there's a part in the book where I say, like, listen, none of us, not a single one of us, well, at least it doesn't feel this way to me, want to be given the option to write for as long as we want. We had plenty of time. We could have written down anything that we wanted, and now we will be graded on our fullest, best effort. We will be graded accordingly and accurately on our fullest, best effort. Nobody wants that. Yeah. Nobody wants to know this is the limit of my abilities. This is the limit of my talents. Maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as talented as I one day hope to be. And so we use procrastination to cushion ourselves and insulate ourselves from having to come face to face with how much talent do we actually have. Because we're afraid no matter what we do, it still won't be as good as we want it to be.
Yeah.
Woof.
Man.
Woof.
Yep. Hit the nail on the head, or however that saying goes.
Right.
Yeah. It's so true. I mean, I've heard that on repeat over and over. So I will be noodling on this one for quite some time and really diving into, what does it look like to identify and call out whatever it is that I'm avoiding, and then flip that switch and use it to my advantage.
That's right.
To keep going. So yeah, Mary, thank you for doing the research, for taking the time, for writing about these things. Because I know what it has meant to me. Just getting my hands on an early copy has been such a gift. And I'm so excited for more and more folks to get their hands on the book. So
me too.
I appreciate all the work you've put into it so much. And I'm just excited to see how it's used in the world. So
me too. It was 12 months of 12-hour days. So I will take all of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is nuts, but so good. And what a gift you've given the world. So thank you for sharing your words. I do have one final question for you, Mary.
Okay.
It's a question I ask all my guests, but Mary, what do you know to be absolutely true about the Lord?
Oh boy. I think with each book I've written, I feel like God was really just showing me a different part of his character, but they're sort of like sub parts and they kind of all reflect back to this one truth. I underestimated. I'm like, we repeat the lesson until it is learned, only we never seem to learn it.
Right.
So I've definitely been repeating this lesson through these books. And that is that there is no external person. There's no external moment that is going to suddenly make me worthy of love. That I'm going to have arrived at a place where now I matter, that this chasing of like belonging and, mattering to other people or being included or somebody to tap me on the forehead and say, now you've arrived, that moment does not exist. In chapter 9, we talk about this crosshair intersection of paid her dues and waited her turn, and there is no there. Yeah. We get to that moment and the target just keeps moving. There is no actual intersection where other people's approval and permission will finally make us feel like enough. So I feel like God has been just reminding me over and over that he made me on purpose, the way that he made me. This book, Carrie, I feel like my friends have been calling it my Eras Tour, because it's like all the different aspects of Mary were given full permission to show up. You know, there is the intelligence, this IQ meets EQ, the pop culture references, and the very, very deep, we're going to cry for a little bit together kind of moments. The 80s references and lyrics. I'm going to talk about Care Bears in a very serious thought leader book. Like, we're just going to show up 1000% the way that God made me, the story that he's given me, the gifts that he's given me, the personality that he's given me, and I'm going to use those gifts to help the people I feel like I've been most called to serve. And that is more than enough. And I just feel like God delights in that. And I think it's like such a gift that we look, especially like writers and creatives, we miss it sometimes, what a cool gift it is that we get to co-create with God. Every single day I was writing this book, I would sit down and I would say, God, I do the whole thing about, I can't believe this idea picked me. I can't believe I was paying attention when it picked me. Now let me do everything I need to run my race well and get this thing across the finish line as the fullest, most complete iteration of itself it most wants to be. And to do that, will you give me a Mary-sized portion, just a Mary brain-sized portion of access to your infinite well of creativity, your infinite well of wisdom, this overlapping shore where the two meet in this kind of explosion of new ideas, or ideas said in ways people haven't quite heard them before, that will hit them exactly as they need to have it hit them. Like, can I have this place where wisdom and creativity overlap, a Mary-sized portion? And every day I got to sit down and co-create with the creator of the universe, without anybody else's approval or permission or co-signing the work that he created for me. So it's been a 3-book process, but maybe this time the lesson will actually stick.
I love it. No, it's so true. And I love that you invited him in every day of writing, because I love the picture of us co-creating together with the creator of the universe.
That's right.
And the result is just beautiful, Mary. So thank you so very much for this book. Like I said, I hope you sell a gazillion copies, and I will be looking for a report. I'm just kidding.
Nice. I have 2 things for your people too. If that's
awesome.
Okay.
Of course, that's okay.
Okay, so the first one I want to tell you about is in Slow Growth. Actually, I first introduced these 5 characters, and they carry over into Underestimated. They are the 5 different achiever types, and they carry over into Underestimated to talk about how those achiever types end up getting stuck and playing small. And so we have the performer, who is always on their toes because they need to show both themselves and other people how far they've come. We have the tightrope walker, who could care less who's clapping, but they need higher and higher death-defying feats in order to feel the same amount of good. We have the masquerader, who hides in plain sight and shoves other people into the spotlight. The contortionist, who is our classic people pleaser, because to contort is easier than to be criticized. And the illusionist in the distance, who believes that until all the conditions to begin and they themselves are perfect, then they shouldn't even start. And so if you go to achieverquiz.com or marymarantz.com/quiz, my last name is Marantz, you can take the quiz. It takes like 2 minutes to take the questions, to do the questions, 10 minutes if you really overthink it. The questions are super fun, and then in true Mary form, the results go super deep. And so for each type, I'm going to tell you how you get stuck playing small, what trips you up, and how we move forward from here. So that's achieverquiz.com. And then if you go to namethefear.com, we have all the information about the book up there. And Carrie, we've actually put it up where all of your listeners can go and download the first chapter for free, starting right now. They can read that whole first chapter, dive into the book, kind of get that feeling of who this book is for, what my writing style is, all of that. And then if they are over there, pre-orders are huge for books we want to see out there in the world more. They literally make the entire difference on whether Amazon recommends it to people or not. So if you go ahead and pre-order, we have the first 3 chapters available for you right away. And then also when the book comes out, you are going to get the audiobook in addition to ordering the hardcover. And so you kind of get 2 books for the price of 1. I read the audiobook, so if you've enjoyed the last hour, you're going to love the audiobook. And you can find all of that at namethefear.com or marymarantz.com/underestimated. And then at Mary Marantz on Instagram. Come tell me what your achiever type is. Tell me what you thought of the episode.
I love it, Mary. Thank you so much for those gifts. I appreciate that so much. And I know that our listeners will as well. So Thank you so much for doing this, Mary. It's been an absolute delight to speak with you today, and I'm super grateful. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you.